Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Council of the Americas YPA program. My name is Francisco Martinez. I'm Senior Associate and Head of YPA in Miami. Today we have the pleasure of hosting our first YPA Innovators Spotlight series program, where we seek to highlight the experiences of young changemakers who are driving innovation not only in the United States, but across the Americas, and who are making an impact around the world at an accelerated pace. To kick off our series, I could not think of a better person than my friend Ivana de Maria. She is an actress and a producer of film and television, and of course, an entrepreneur. Her startup, StoryPlace, has created a diverse digital community of people that share stories with each other and access tools for developing their stories into content for film and television. StoryPlace has spanned to over 90 countries since its launch just about 2 years ago. Ivana was born in Mexico and earned her bachelor's degree in business administration with a concentration in finance and the law at Boston University. But while she was in college, she spent her summers at Stella Adler's studio of acting in New York. She then went to Los Angeles, where she specialized in storytelling and began a career as an actress and a producer. Ivana has produced, written, and starred in a number of films and television shows that many in the audience likely know about. She was a co-star on La Piloto on Netflix, a guest star on Descontrol by Lemon Studios and W Studios for Univision. She was a series regular on La Bella y las Bestias on Netflix, as well as a producer for the TV series Monarca on Netflix as well. Ivana is also actively involved in social causes with multiple organizations. She is with Visionary Women, This Is About Humanity, and the Yes We Can mobile schools. She sits on the Board of Justice for Migrant Women and is the Vice President of the San Fernando Valley Refugee Children's Center, which receives unaccompanied minors who flee their homes and seek political asylum. She's fluent in Spanish, English, French, Italian, and is on her way to learning Russian. I'll ask her more about that. I look forward to chatting with you, Ivana, in a few moments so we can learn the intricacies of your fascinating career and your entrepreneurship journey with StoryPlace. I encourage everyone that's joining us today to participate, asking questions during the Q&A session, either by typing your question on the chat or by raising your hand virtually so you can be placed on the question queue. For those of you who are joining us for the first time, YPA is the Young Leaders Network of the Council of the Americas. Our programming convenes the rising stars of multinationals, multilatinas, and organizations across business sectors and who share a common interest in public policy and business, investment, and culture of our region. Today our program is sadly the last YPA program of this year, and I speak on behalf of our entire network's leadership and board of directors to thank you. Thank you for joining us, and thank you for all of your support this year. I'd like to also give a special thank you to our YPA global sponsors, BMW Group and BlackRock. Their support to our network allows us to carry our mission forward. So thank you. 2022 will be a year for the books as we have new initiatives and series in YPA ahead of us. Not only do we have our Crypto 101 series, our Wine and Politics series, but we expect to return to our private restaurant tours and wine tastings, our private museum tours, our signature YPA cafecitos with leaders in business and policy and academia, and of course, the continuation of our Innovators Spotlight series. The best part is that if conditions allow it, we hope to host the majority of our meetings in person or in a hybrid format. And so we are very eager to welcome you in 2022 back to YPA. Should your organization be interested in supporting the young professionals of the Americas, we are always open and welcome to speak with you about ways in which you can contribute to the network. Feel free to reach me at fmartinez@as-coa.org if you have any questions in that regard. Now, as a reminder, today's program is private. However, it will be recorded and posted on the ASUA website. So please keep your microphone silenced to avoid any interference, and only unmute yourself when you are recognized to speak. We will try to end the conversation at 5 o'clock to be mindful of everyone's time. Now, Ivana, thank you for joining us. Walk us through your journey. So how and why did you create StoryPlace? What was your source of inspiration?
Well, first of all, thank you for having me. This is very exciting. And when I first moved to LA, I really thought I was coming here to focus solely on acting. But that very quickly changed. I love acting. I hated the way the world worked around acting, but I loved the art of it. But so, I realized that I really, if I wanted to pursue this career, if I wanted to be the one telling the stories that I wanted to be telling on screens, I needed to take things into my own hands a bit. And so I started producing very quickly. I started, more than anything, looking for stories to take to screens, and stories that I wanted to act, or stories I wanted to tell, or stories I wanted to portray, or in some way or another. And so to me, it was always about the stories. It was always about finding those stories that I felt needed to be told and heard, and that could change people's lives. And so in that same regard, I love to travel, and I always am on the lookout for stories, for no specific reason at all, other than just to learn about them. And so you'll find me either sitting in a airport talking to a stranger for hours about their entire lives, or whoever I can find that will open up. And believe me, I will do my best to get those stories out of them. But so the point is, I've always been looking for stories because I'm curious. I'm curious about people. I'm curious about where they come from, where they're going, what they are thinking, what they want. Why are they how they are? And so I was always looking for stories. And so on the one hand, I was always listening to people's stories. And on the other hand, I was always surrounded by people in the entertainment industry or in media in general, always saying, oh, we need stories. We're looking for stories. Or oh, there's no diversity in Hollywood because there's no stories. And so it was always this weird disconnect where I thought, there's all these people looking for stories, and then there's the rest of the world with millions and millions of stories to tell. So I wanted to go and find stories, basically. And I remember thinking, well, one way to do it is to just, get a backpack and just travel the world for the rest of my life looking for stories. But that doesn't seem practical or realistic. I don't know how I'm going to turn that into a business. I was like, so what's another way to find stories? And so I kept looking, online, like story database, or like, I wanted to find like a Google, but of only people's stories and real stories and raw stories. And I found a lot of social media platforms, but none of them had this. I couldn't find this anywhere. Not Twitter, not Instagram, not Facebook, not Medium, not any of it. And so I decided to, if I couldn't find it, I would create it. And so I started to think, well, I don't know a lot about tech, but I use it a lot, and I know how to use an app. So I know as a consumer what I expect from this imaginary product that is yet to exist. And so I took pieces of paper and I started drawing out what I wanted to find. And that was really the first step in that direction.
And when did you have that? Was there ever like an aha moment where you were like, oh, I'll create an app? Or did that just kind of happen, as you went?
I think
How did
it started off with, the asking, well, more so having these realizations of, okay, what would it be? Like, what would this have to be in order to work? Well, somehow people would be able to share with each other in like immediately in seconds, easily, with with no judgment, without the need to be writers, like basically taking off all the barriers, like easy, safe, blah blah blah. And so I said, okay, well, it would be a tech driven thing because that's the time we're living in, and apps were so popular at the time, still are. So it was like, okay, so it'll also, this was a rookie mistake, but I, like many people that I've now realized, whenever I thought of building anything technology related, the only thing that came to mind was an app. But that's not true. There's a lot of ways you can go about digitalizing an idea. But at the time, I was like, well, it would be an app. Okay, so an app, because it gives you a sense of belonging when there's an icon on your phone and it's immediately a community you're a part of. And so all of these different things. And so it was sort of an obvious thing that if I wanted this to accomplish what I wanted it to accomplish, it needed to be tech driven, which to me meant app.
Right. That's amazing and so remarkable. Really, just I think we're already big admirers of your work. And to that point, Ivana, so I'm sure you had an end goal in mind when you began StoryPlace. So I wonder if what you had in mind as you launched the app, or or the company, um, if that is reflective of what you have accomplished thus far, and whether you've had any new goals or new ideas sort of incorporated to your initial idea, your initial goal.
That's a great question. I mean, yeah. And so I want to just take one step back and just, for anyone who doesn't know what StoryPlace is, because I think it'll help with the context. StoryPlace is an app. It's a digital community where people around the world share stories with each other. And so it's a safe space where people share, like, just literally anything they want, reflections, anecdotes, memories. It's like, you can think of it like sitting around the fire and sharing stories with strangers, but in an app or a website you can also access through web. But so, to your question, yeah, I mean, I remember the day StoryPlace launched. Somebody asked me how I felt, and for some reason I gave this very strange like metaphor of how I felt, and I'm going to share it because, and I hope it makes sense because it makes a lot of sense with your question. The day I launched, people were like, so how does it feel? And I said, it feels a little bit like I decided, okay, I'm going to create a bird and this bird will fly. And so I started looking for materials and I just started putting them together. And I said, okay, well, this, and I guess, oh, and I made up some glue to stick the feathers. And then I did this, and then I was like, went to the highest building and I said, okay, I'm going to throw this bird in the air and this bird will fly. And I had planned everything, his whole flight track, like everywhere of what it was going to do, everything about where it was going to go, how it was going to fly. But the truth of it was that when I just threw it up and it started flying, it was more about me following the flight than the bird actually listening to what I thought it was going to do. So,
That you're okay after that billing drop.
exactly. To that point, I think you can plan everything from its life to its death of your app, but in the end of the day, it's really about listening and learning up from the users.
Yeah,
I've learned, I still do every day. It's sometimes I get PTSD because I go back to revisit an idea that I had, 2 years ago, and that failed 2 years ago, but turns out right now could actually work. And so it's always about listening and this constant adjusting and constant, trial and error. And so, I mean, the essence of StoryPlace has remained, and that I think is the most important thing. Its core values, the values that it was created on, like empathy, which is like the strongest base of StoryPlace. Every decision that is taken, every decision that I take, I consider the empathy driven aspect of this community. Will it affect it? If it does, then we will not pursue that, because that is the core essence of StoryPlace. So things like those have helped because they've become sort of like my North Stars. But in reality, you need to be flexible in order to really listen to how people are using it and what they want.
Right, right. No, and I totally agree. And I think empathy being at the core really just, does carry your mission. I think, as a matter of fact, I understand that StoryPlace became, I don't know if you plan on this or not, but it became sort of a safe haven for
Yeah.
communities that, that submit anonymous stories, whether they're being undermined by society for their choices or their looks, or even folks who face health struggles, mental health struggles. You know, did you expect this community to be created, and how has this inspired you?
I honestly did not. I I hadn't really even considered it in that way. When I decided to create StoryPlace, to me it was more about making sure that no story went untold. That was my main thing. I kept thinking of all the stories in the world that went untold and that nobody ever heard them, and with them like all these opportunities of learning and growth and connection and empathy. And so to me it was more about connecting, and about connecting at a human level, which I felt was being lost very much so with social media. But I never considered that this would become a safe, like really a safe space in a digital era, which is so difficult to have, for very vulnerable communities. I remember the first community that came on StoryPlace was the LGBTQ plus youth community. And I was surprised just because it wasn't even that we were like targeting the community or doing anything specific, in order to accomplish this. It was more so that people, and it wasn't even a specific geographic area that was being attracted into StoryPlace. It was mostly people around the world that connected, or that the common denominator between them was, they were part of the LGBT community, or that they were looking for somewhere to talk or read about mental health, or like it was, the common denominators were topics, which is why we suddenly had users really quickly in over 90 countries. And we were like, what? Like, how is this so spread? And it was because they're all, no matter where they are, part of the same community.
Right.
And so a lot of communities started coming on StoryPlace and really finding that it was a safe space, that they could actually express themselves and not be judged. And this wasn't a place to hate or to cancel people. It was a place where authenticity and difference in opinions was actually appreciated. And this was something I also didn't realize how difficult this was to accomplish. Most people thought I was crazy. They were like, yeah, right now, because you have few users, like this will never last. And it has lasted, and it really translates. And
And
so,
you
yeah, it's been amazing.
if a person posts a story on StoryPlace, can that person you know receive comments, or how is it different from social media from the standpoint of perhaps people going back and I don't know, and typing
Yeah.
a comment with hate or something? Is that something that happens in StoryPlace at all, or?
So people share stories on StoryPlace. You can share stories. It's mostly written, but you can also share audio and video, but it's fairly new. And then you can interact with stories. You can like stories. You can comment on stories. You can follow storytellers. But for example, you can't see how many likes anyone has except your stories. You can't see how many followers anyone has except your own. And a lot of things about the way I design StoryPlace are are basically ways that I think you should live your life. So, for example, you can't compare yourself to anyone other than yourself.
Right.
And
No,
so you don't really know how you're doing, if your story is doing well or not, or whatever that means. You're not sharing for the likes or for the popularity. So all of these things have led to that safe place. For example, if people share on StoryPlace, it's truly for self-expression. Um, there is the interaction, and there's DMs, and there's all these things, there's comments. But I think because of the way we designed it, the way we built it, and because there really isn't like all these other incentives of, share for likes and let's get you addicted into StoryPlace and endless scrolling. Like, it's really not about that. It's supposed to be a space that is actually good for your mental health.
mm,
And I think that's part of the reason why it's attracted the right crowd. We have reporting in place, for example, but we've never had anyone report a comment. We do a lot of, we go through things, we monitor things, and we haven't had to delete anything. And so I mean, every time I say it, I get nervous because I don't want to jinx it, and I'm sure that we'll face that as we continue to grow. But during the pandemic, an investor asked me, "Well, you talk about empathy all day. How are you measuring empathy?" And I said, that is a great question. Let me get back to you. And I went and we decided to take all of the comments across stories and do data analysis, like sentiment analysis and other things. And we basically came back with the results that, maybe, I don't know, out of maybe 20 or 30,000 comments, about 200 were marked as negative. And then when we went through each and every one of them, they were marked as negative because they'd say things like, "Oh no, I'm so sorry you went through that," or like whatever it was, but it wasn't actually a negative comment. And so when we went through them, the result was that we didn't have one single negative, like hate speech, one single bullying, like none of that.
Wow.
And nobody believed that was even possible. But it was, and it still is working amazingly. And even though the stories people share are very vulnerable, some can be controversial to some people's beliefs, and you can share anonymously because you have a pen name. So I mean, it has all the ingredients for cyberbullying, and yet it's not a thing.
No, that's remarkable, and I think it's such an antidote for the society that we live in. So driven by controversial things happening every day, and you see it in social media especially. And I'm sure, like many startups, everything is hard from the start, and I'm sure it was the same for you. But could you share with us, a time that things got really, really hard for you, like an experience that you can think about, and what sort of gave you the courage to persist despite the hardship?
Oh my God, I have so many. Uh,
We're all here.
I think contrary to popular belief, the more your company grows or the more successful, and I say that because it is, the more stressful everything is. It's not like, oh, you reached whatever users, or you got whatever investment, you must be sleeping so much better at night. And it's like, no, actually it's quite the opposite. When StoryPlace started, it was about me. I mean, it was like my idea. If I didn't do it, the only person that wasn't going to sleep at night was me.
Yeah.
And it was really, I mean, it was nerve-wracking, and it was so confusing, but it was just that the stakes were were lower, I guess. And then as people start joining, and then people start counting on it, and then there's users, and then there's employees, or I mean, it just changes everything. It's no, now suddenly you have all these other factors to consider. And especially with StoryPlace, when people started sharing very vulnerable, very honest stories, and I started getting a lot of messages from people telling me how much StoryPlace was helping them, how much it was. I mean, I got really so many messages. Some people, one person in particular, who told me that she was considering ending her life, and that which, I mean, unfortunately, these messages are more common than not on social media, direct messaging and stuff like that. And she said that she, by chance came across something about StoryPlace somewhere, and she went on it and she read a story, and then she decided to share a story. And it was a suicide prevention month. It was our topic in September. And so we had a lot of stories about it. And so she wrote a story, and then she kept writing, and people kept commenting on it. And then she started remembering how much she likes writing, and etc. And then, long story short, she ended up actually remembering what her passion is and her dream, and really getting her life together. And she decided to start her business that she always wanted to do. And she really found a community on StoryPlace that she didn't actually know, but that somehow helped her go through this. And I remember I got that message like probably within the first 6 months of StoryPlace launch. And then about a year after that, so probably during the pandemic, during the pandemic, I mean, I got to a point where StoryPlace was doing so well, but if it was a nonprofit, it would be doing great. Like, I needed to find a way to basically turn this into a profitable business without sacrificing the values that it stood for. And this was so difficult. And I kept bumping walls, and I kept just disagreeing with investment meetings where they would be like, well, if you added, the likes games, you would increase engagement by so much. And I'm like, yeah, I can't. Like, I'm so sorry. I don't, if I'm gonna create another Instagram, then please, like, I quit. Like, I don't want to. I don't think the world needs that. And so I kept like hitting these walls where I really thought, am I insane? Like, am I just insane? And is this gonna just, empty my bank account, and I don't know what I'm doing? And anyway, very demotivating moment. And suddenly I get a package in the mail. Let me show you. I get a package in the mail, and I'm like, what is this? I don't know what this is. And I open it, and it's a book. And it has a StoryPlace logo on top. And I was like, what? Like, what is this? And I open it, and in the first page, there's a dedication thing. It turns out it's that girl that first wrote me,
Wow.
when it was 6 months of StoryPlace life, and she finally accomplished her dream. She wrote a book based on all of the stories that she wrote on StoryPlace.
Oh, wow.
And she talks about how StoryPlace saved her life, about how this is the most amazing thing that's happened, how she's found her new purpose. And she's self-published it on Amazon. She even put her logo, the QR for her StoryPlace profile. And I saw this, and I was like,
so incredible.
My God. And so, I mean, if I needed motivation, like, that was the motivation well, that was all I needed. And every time that I have those moments, something happens always with a user on StoryPlace that reminds me of why I need to keep going.
And I commend you for that. I'm sure everyone in this call does, because it went from an idea to quite literally saving someone's life. That's just amazing. So
yeah, it really is.
yeah,
It's always about, for me, going back to the why has been a constant help. It's like whenever I'm stuck, I'm like, okay, why? Let's go back to the why. And somehow going back to the why always gives me an answer.
right. And it points you north.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And so, but then, so is that how the StoryPlace Pro came about? Is that the solution you found after hitting the walls?
One of them, yes. One of them it was. I always was like, I don't want to charge anyone for anything on story. It was like, obviously, I mean, that's an ideal world. But
Right.
then I started, under just making peace with the fact that this is a business, and we need to all, figure out how to move forward. And so with Pro, and especially with this, when I got this book, I was already thinking about this, sort of coming back full circle to why I started StoryPlace. When I sat down and I said, what was my why when I initially did this? And I said, of course, I wanted to find stories to turn into content. This is content. This is a book.
Right.
There's content, can be, podcasts, books, TV shows, movies, animation, whatever you wanted to turn your story into. But that was one of my, like, the base of my original why. And so I realized that was, going back full circle was one of the ways that I was going to figure this out. And so I decided to develop tools that would essentially help people get one step closer to turning their stories into content. People that are not in the industry, people that are not writers or screenwriters, and also don't want to be. Like, you shouldn't have to change your life just because you want to turn your story into something. You can just tell your story and find the right people that can do that, and get your, credits and your whatever, monetary compensation and is involved, and all those things. And so that's when I decided I would launch StoryPlace Pro, which is a subscription model for StoryPlace. And you pay $4.99 a month or $49 a year, and you get access to all these tools. For example, if you have a story that you want to turn into a movie or a TV show, you can go on StoryPlace and write it as a treatment. And a treatment in the entertainment industry is one step before a script. But usually you need to like know how to write a treatment. Even people in the industry don't really know how to write a treatment properly. And
Wow.
so what we did is we made it into a form of like, treatments for dummies template. And
Ah,
so it's like a fill in the blank format that explains every step of the way what to do. You don't need to know anything in advance except your story. And we guide you through it. And then at the end, the software turns it into a treatment for you. And so it's really about Pro is about democratizing a lot of these processes that usually are the barriers of entry into all of these industries in order to really get people, get it in the hands of the creators and of the storytellers.
that's
Um,
right. It becomes a two-way street because story plays, even not in Story Pro, as you can see. I mean, you had this person create a book, but now it's a two-way street where the folks that are looking for content for their shows and the TVs, they have a gigantic vault of stories, and they are conveniently put in a way that are more appealing to their business, and also gives people an opportunity to really, as you said, claim credit, whether it is name or monetary. That's
yeah,
uh,
definitely. I mean, my thoughts with it were always, if the content that we see across media, whether it's books, TV shows, movies, ads, commercials, like whatever it is, if the content that we see is meant to represent us all, then shouldn't all of us have the chance to be the ones telling the stories that are being told there?
right.
And it was really like very simple. I mean, I think all of StoryPlace is so, when you think about it, you're like, yeah, like everyone tells me, oh, yeah, that doesn't exist. I'm like, no.
Mhm.
That for some reason that wasn't a thing.
And so I also wanted to ask you because to me it was so very interesting your background and the fact that you're so involved. So a good friend, Patrick McGinnis, who is actually used to be on the board of YPA, he wrote a book that was called The 10% Entrepreneur. And the bottom line of the book is it's a push for entrepreneurs to just sort of get started on their project without quitting their day jobs. And so you're an actress, you're a producer, you're super involved in social causes, and you're learning Russian. Uh, you know, where do you have the time? Could you, could you, well, first of all, when you were getting started, was Story Plays sort of a nights and weekends gig for you? And also, what are some of the strategies that you could share with us as far as time management? Which is, I think, a skill that it's acquired mostly by experiences like that of yourself.
That's a great question. I mean, uh, it's tough because on the one hand, well, to be fair, I had to put Russian on hold.
I,
Like
I
that,
I
we had
think
to
Italian,
sacrifice.
Spanish, French, and English would do for
Yeah,
now.
like we had to sacrifice that one. But but no, initially I I mean, I always, when I was starting, I remember I kept saying, "Oh, 24 hours is so much in a day. Like you can do so many things in 24 hours." Um, and the thing is, at the same time, that acting, even producing, like anything in the entertainment industry, unfortunately and fortunately for me in this case, is incredibly unstable. And so, I mean, you can be working like suddenly you're on a project and you don't have a life, you can't even breathe, but then you're like unemployed for a couple months. So you're like, oh, okay. And so it's such a ridiculous industry that I think that also probably helped me. I and that's also one of the reasons why I couldn't really stay just acting, because I remember thinking I need to be way busier and like I need stability in my life. Like I need something. Clearly, startup life was not what gave me stability. But
It'd be
but so
perfect.
yeah, when I started StoryPlace, I mean it wasn't even like a night or day thing. It was just always like all the time. Like whenever I wasn't in an audition or I wasn't in a meeting of production, like something like that, I was thinking about StoryPlace. And I remember I thought about it. I thought about it a lot, but then I also decided to stop thinking so much about it, because the more I thought about it, the more I kept encountering things I didn't know how to do. And then the moment I had things that I didn't know how to do in the process of, creating StoryPlace in my mind, I would be like, oh yeah, no, this is not a good idea. It's not, yeah, no, I don't know how, no, yeah. And then you start creating all this buildup of like, and so actually one of the things that I always say is like, if you have an idea and you want to pursue it, just you really cannot focus on the things you don't know. Like, just don't be afraid of what you don't know. You'll figure it out. And that was my slogan throughout the whole thing of StoryPlace, was like, I don't know how, but somehow. Like, I have no idea how. And people would ask me, but how are you gonna? I'm like, I have no idea, but I'll let you know. When I figure it out, I'll let you know.
That's yeah, I mean that I think that's the motivation that many out there, really see their revolutionary ideas perhaps fall under the like through the cracks because they think differently than you did. So that's very
Well,
very
yeah, and I think many times we're sort of led to believe that you need to have all those answers before you start, and there's so much you don't know until you do it. Like nobody knows anything until they suddenly do something. And so I mean, and in terms of time management, I have to admit that it was hard for me because a lot of people kept telling me to block my times, like 1 hour a day this, 1 hour a day that, blah blah. And I don't work well like that. I personally need like cramming sessions. So I need to have
flexible cramming.
like 10 hours and I'll finish a script and then we're done with it. Like I can't write an hour a day. It drives me insane. And so, but I really think it's very personal. I think as everyone is different, but I do think it's important to find a way to manage your time so that I think you can do many things at the same time. We're living at the time of multi hyphenates. Like you can do anything you want at the same time as long as you are organized.
And thank you. And I just want to remind everyone that if you have questions, in a few moments we are going to open it up to the audience, so you can go ahead and start typing or raising your hand virtually so that we can recognize you to speak. And to that point, Ivana, you know, most startups, I think the big doubt of most entrepreneurs or those who wish to be an entrepreneur, they get that mental setback that, how am I going to find investors? You just start kind of, boggling with the question. And most startups do need investors to start, and all startups, I would argue, need investors to gain scale. So this is a question on being facing rejection, because I think that also plays a role. So being rejected by investors does occur more often than not. And so have you faced any tough no's? And if so, what sort of gave you the courage to carry forward, despite a hard no, and you're selling this new idea, and you're so confident about it, and then someone's like, nope. And so how did you react to that?
As you were saying that, I was like, I actually think that acting prepared me for
Oh
this.
yeah.
There's not like
Yeah.
no career path gets more rejection than acting.
Ah,
But no, but you're right. I do think that, I mean, of course, I've heard no's, so many, all the time, every day. Whether it's no, what, there's so many different kinds of the no. It's not even your typical, no, I'm not going to give you money. Like it can be like, no, your idea is not good. It can be like somebody, everyone has opinions. I think that, I mean, it's hard. It's hard not to be demotivated by it. Like I said, like I was at, I've had moments where I'm like, am I insane? Like, and then every time I ask the question, people that work with me, they're like, yes. But they mean it in a good way.
in a good way. In a good way.
But it's just, it's hard to try to constantly convince people to like understand or think the way you do. It's one, there's elements of preference, there's elements of even like, for example, of experience. One of the things that happened to me a lot when I decided that content creation was one of the things I wanted to focus on with StoryPlace, helping people, anyone in the world, take their stories to the screens, for example. And I kept talking about this huge demand for content that we are now. And I said, there's the highest demand for content ever, and content doesn't exist without a story.
Right.
And so, if you start with the stories and giving, whatever. And so I remember these investors,
So that was part of your elevator pitch, sort of.
That was, and with the pro aspect, yes, it was like, there's this huge demand for content. Content doesn't exist without a story. Also, not only content, but diverse and authentic content, which requires diverse and authentic voices telling these stories. So, it's time to give a chance to everyone in the world. And so with this, a lot of people would be like, I don't know. I turned on Netflix and like, I don't think I need more content. And I'd be like, I understand. And it was very hard for me to not like be like, what do you mean? But anyway, and I'd be like, yeah, I understand, but it was hard because it was somebody that didn't like was so far away from the entertainment industry. And yet, I was trying to explain to him this demand that was in the industry, that obviously if I speak to somebody in the industry, they'd be like, yeah, there's not even close to being enough content that to meet the demand that there is, blah, blah. But anyway, so I kept like bumping into all these things, and it really forced me to take a pause and to reevaluate who I was talking to, who I wanted to talk to, because I kept taking investment meetings, like, as it was like, whoever will give me an investment meeting, I will, just to talk to them. And then I realized that I needed to be much smarter about who I was talking to, not because, I love talking to people, I'll meet whoever, but because it was a disservice. Like, money, you can find money in so many places in the world. The question is, this whole idea of smart money that people talk about, and it's very real, and it's not it's very personal to the company, to the founder, to whatever you're looking for. And so actually one of the best advice that I was given was, somebody told me, one of my board of advisors, she said, what does the ecosystem of StoryPlace look like, of where you want to take StoryPlace? Because I kept thinking I need to fight. It was like, okay, so I need entertainment industry investors. Oh, okay. So, and then I kept going only to entertainment industry investors. But then I realized, because this woman told me, she said, build the ecosystem of where you want StoryPlace to be. And then with all the things that you need in order to get there, find an investor for each thing. Like, if you want to implement blockchain and AI to help with content creation, for example, then find an investor who can help you with blockchain. Find an investor who can help you with AI. Find an investor who can help you with, it doesn't have to be the same one. Right. And I kept trying to sort of find this bucket of investors that all, and so then I started really being very creative about the way I was thinking about investors. Right. And a lot of people that I hadn't, and also understanding that depending on who I was speaking to, you sort of customize the story. It's all about the story you're telling, right? And so it wasn't this one elevator pitch that was going to help, that was going to work with everyone. If I was talking to somebody in the entertainment industry, I was going to focus on content. If I was going to talk to somebody in blockchain, I was going to focus on IP or whatever. Right. And so it was really about learning how to not custom, but personalize the story for every person. And in terms of the rejection, not taking it personally, and always listening, like truly listening to what people had to say. Because if somebody didn't understand it, I wanted to know why. And that did help me. I wasn't going to try to convince them, but I did want to understand why not, so that, maybe there was something there that I needed to be paying attention to.
Right. No, I completely agree. And I think you are on the right track as well. Sort of diversifying your portfolio of ideas to sort of fundraise and catering to the right buckets And I think that is the strategy. But you mentioned that was a piece of advice, so I wonder, the same way that you created StoryPlace, you were very specific about how you wanted it to be, how you wanted it to operate, always sort of holding to principle. When you were building your team, because of course, all great things happen with a good team. What was your sort of criteria when you were building the team that would help you, and particularly folks that you could trust to carry your vision forward? I also understand there's the role of an ambassador program, correct?
Yeah.
I'd love to hear more about that as well.
Yeah, that was amazing. So it was the first year that StoryPlace was launched, and everyone kept telling me about ambassadors, like the whole ambassadors idea. And I never really understood. I was like, who's gonna want to spend their free time volunteering at StoryPlace, in any way? And yet, we put it on StoryPlace's social media, and we sent out an email and we said, if anyone wants to be an ambassador, send your applications. And we got so many applications. And at first I was like, oh no, they think it's paid. This is going to be so embarrassing. And so then we would send back, a thing and be like, just as a reminder, this is volunteer and blah, blah, blah. And this is what it means. You represent StoryPlace in your own cities, and, you help us understand what kinds of story topics your communities are interested in. And anyway, so we ended, and everyone was like, yeah, I'm interested. And right now we have around 35 ambassadors, and there's no repeated cities. So there's from, Mexico, Guatemala, Philippines, Ireland, Australia, France, Italy, Colombia, Argentina, everywhere. In the US as well, there's many: New York, Miami, Washington, San Jose. There's so many. And it was amazing because I was so thankful to these. Initially it was all women. I was so thankful because I couldn't believe that anyone cared about StoryPlace as much as I did. Like, it was like, what? And so I created WhatsApp groups with them, one in English and one in Spanish. I remember I asked them to send me a video of why they loved StoryPlace. And watching these videos, these answers, was so surreal. Like, I learned so much about StoryPlace. And I actually rewatched this video many times. We're actually going through a rebranding phase right now for StoryPlace. And one of the things that we are using for that rebranding is that initial ambassador video, because I took all of their responses and I put it together in a video. And it was so surreal to hear how other people would describe StoryPlace, that something that I thought was so personal to me. And then I realized it was personal to everyone.
Right.
And so really, I think the biggest value and the biggest, successful thing that I did with StoryPlace, that we did as a team, was creating a community. You can have so many users, it doesn't matter. That doesn't mean that they're a community. And so really creating this sense of community where doesn't matter where they are in the world, or if they've ever met each other, or if they ever will meet each other in person. I know so much about these people's lives through their stories. We have WhatsApp groups. We talk about the features. Whenever they have an idea for StoryPlace, I take the time to listen to their idea. I thank them for their idea. It's really a matter of making these initial users of StoryPlace a part of the team, and they love it. And they constantly, whenever there's new features, they're like, oh, I feel so proud of seeing how StoryPlace has grown. They're a part of it.
They take ownership of it, and they are the success of it too.
And that's really, I couldn't have asked for better ambassadors. And in terms of the team, we're 4 people, and one of them was an ambassador, and I ended up hiring her. Because she had so many ideas all the time, and she used StoryPlace more than anyone. And then I remember talking to her at one point, and she was helping me with some things, and I was paying her like freelance once every little bit when I needed something. And then I just said, listen, I really want to hire you. And she lives in Dominican Republic, and I've never met her in person, but we talk all day. And she is amazing. And she's honestly like a crucial part of the team now. And she's still one of the people that writes the most stories as a user.
Wow.
So it's, I mean, you can't find that any other way than through a community.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Perhaps the most organic way of getting
it
the
really
right
is. Yeah.
person for the job. That's incredible. So we actually have one question from the audience, and I wanted to tie it in just to this question because you were talking about rebranding, and so my question is, what is next for StoryPlace in 2022, if you can say, and then Areli Flores is asking what real movies have been developed with stories from StoryPlace, and that she's very excited to watch them, and then maybe if there's any upcoming.
Yeah, thank you. Well, thank you, Areli. So there's a lot of very exciting things coming in 2022. 2021 was definitely a year of a lot of epiphanies.
Okay.
On epiphanies, a lot of epiphanies, a lot of brainstorming on walls, um, and and really figuring out, how to take StoryPlace to the next level, how to really continue to scale and maintain these beautiful values and community that we have. In terms of the movie question, it's very exciting. We right now have two, actually two. So on StoryPlace, you can write series as well. You can write, a series and then add whatever stories you want to your series. We have two story series that are currently in development for a TV show. And I personally am so excited about those because I think they're going to be a huge success and I love them. And I think that it's the kind of stories that will really, really create an impact. So we have two that are currently in development as a TV show. And then one, we did story competitions with different production companies. We'll do story competitions, treatment competitions, whenever somebody's looking for stories about a specific thing. And the first one we ever did was last October. We did a horror story competition. And it was hosted by Lemon Studios, who's a production company in Mexico. They do a lot of content. And they wanted horror stories for film. And we had a lot of submissions, and one of the stories won, and it's about to start filming production. And I can't really say much about what it's about, but it's terrifying. uh, and the guy who won, the guy who wrote it, is a really young guy who lives in Tijuana, who works at the Secretary of Foreign Affairs or something like that office in Tijuana. And he just so happened to have the greatest scary stories in his terrifying but beautiful mind. And he shared it, and now he actually ended up being also the screenwriter, because it turns out he had taught himself to write scripts through videos or courses or whatnot, and he's actually going to be the screenwriter. So that movie hopefully will come out soon. I don't know when.
Well,
And yeah, I mean, there's a lot of projects right now that are in development, that because they're not all, they're in development with other companies. I can't really get into specifics of those, but I'm hoping that 2022 will be the year where we see a lot of these stories materialize into content that we can actually see. There's also a podcast that came out based on stories from StoryPlace that one of the users did. So yeah, I mean, that's honestly one of the things I'm the most excited about, is creating that funnel, that incubator for stories to go into content. And the other thing is continuing to develop a lot of these storytelling tools, that having the skill to tell stories, whether it's socially with friends, at work, on WebEx, on, for an interview, for your mental health, even like for whatever it is that you want, having the ability and practicing this skill of storytelling that we all have as human beings, because we do. And it's really in our core essence. It's just that we lose it a lot. And a lot of people have difficulty with it. And I really do think that it's a very important skill to have and to learn and to foster and to constantly improve. We can all continuously improve it. And so my idea with StoryPlace right now is to continue to develop tools that will help people become better storytellers, basically.
and I think you're on the right track. So we have two more questions. And I believe it'll probably be the last two questions. But I would like to invite whether Daniela or Eric, if you'd like to unmute yourselves. Daniela, you can go first and ask your question.
Hi, Ivana. It's been great hearing from you. It's such an amazing story, and like your career just seems amazing. And I just wanted to ask, which I know we've heard a lot, talked a lot about the pandemic, but as it affected everything, I wanted to know how it affected or how it changed StoryPlace, and also how do you see it evolving in the post-pandemic world and next year?
Thank you, Daniela. That's a great question.
And I'd like you to hold the thought so that Eric can ask the questions, because we're about to run out of time, so you can address them both. Eric, go ahead.
Yes, thank you very much. So this is a great product. I love it. It's such a great original idea. I congratulate you a lot for this initiative, Ivana. My question would be, have you thought about using, what's new, in the blockchain world with all these new technologies, social tokens, by which, it changes the ownership and how the economic, let's say, the value created in these platforms is shared. So as opposed to the traditional social media platforms where the owners, or let's say the shareholders, are the ones who enjoy the benefit and the users are just providing all the content, it's actually the users that are providing the content which can actually also enjoy the economic benefits of that value creation by using social tokens. So, and of course, the founders would have, would keep some of the tokens for themselves as well. That's it.
Thank you, Eric. I think you understood exactly where I was going by giving the example of blockchain. But yeah, so both of those questions are really great. With the pandemic, for the first question, I saw a lot of content on StoryPlace. It was very bittersweet, because I was planning on getting investment in March of 2020. And we had like a big launch at South by Southwest, and like all of which obviously was canceled. And so we had a huge rise in the amount of stories being shared on StoryPlace during the pandemic. We had a lot of amazing, very interesting topics, which you can still go and read, from couples in quarantine, a personal favorite, a lot of different topics surrounding COVID, essential workers, how everyone was dealing with it. We saw a lot of people sharing. And I personally learned so much more about COVID through the stories on StoryPlace and through the news. There was a point where I just stopped watching the news, because it was all numbers and numbers and numbers and numbers, and it wasn't really teaching me how to like live my life at the moment. And so when I went on StoryPlace and I would read these people's stories, there were girls that were journaling every day in Italy about how they were dealing with it, when things that we hadn't dealt with yet. And so I just learned so much about how people were actually living their life, and how they were dealing with certain things that we were all dealing with in a real way. And so, and also it offered a sense of community to many people who obviously needed it very much so. And in terms of the social tokens, I definitely have been thinking about that a lot. That is definitely one of the stakeholders in my ecosystem that I am addressing.
On the board right there. So
yeah, probably is. It's a great idea, and one of the things that we've been, from the beginning focused on is, well, one, anyone who shares their story on StoryPlace owns their stories, right? So all of this whole thing about empathy driven and safe space and technology for good, like I really emphasize it all the time. Like we don't own people's stories. We're not just about, let's take people's data and like make all this money, and then people like, no, it doesn't work. It's really about it. Of course, it's harder to do it this way, but it's worth it. And so one of the things that I'm very excited about is exploring how blockchain can help us, one, help people monetize their stories, and two, help with copyright as well, copyright of people's stories and protection of IP. I think there's so much we could do there, and also I think it's just the beginning of that.
Absolutely.
So,
and
it's
been an accelerated growth, and I for one admire you very, very much. I think Everyone who joined us today is going back home and likely going to download your app and follow you because your story is really something worth and inspiring to everyone. And we really do so commend you for all that you've done. And I personally thank you, and on behalf of YPA, thank you so much for having taken the time to join us in this being our first YPA Innovators Spotlight program. I think couldn't have had a better conversation. So I think probably virtual round of applause for you. We hope that you can join us again, whether in New York or in DC or in Miami. And we really do look forward to continuing the conversation and so many topics around it, right? You mentioned IP and blockchain, but also we really also look forward to where StoryPlace is headed, to the horror movie, and to everything that's coming in 2022. Thank you, Ivana. De verdad.
Thank you so much. I really enjoyed this, and I hope you invite me again soon, and hopefully in person as well.
Absolutely. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. We'll see you hopefully in Q1 of 2022 for more YPA. And
and if anyone has any questions, I can leave my email if anyone needs it.
What a treat.
There, I sent it in the chat.
Excellent. I can also share it if you like with those who attended. So
yeah, of course.
Who logged out earlier can also shoot you a note if they want to. So
perfect.
Thank you, Ivana. Abrazo grande, and thank you everybody for coming.
Gracias.
See you soon. Bye-bye.